So welcome everybody. So happy to have you with us today. This is our final afternoon of the Ecom 2021 conference, and I've seen so many wonderful presentations today, and I'm so pleased to be facilitating this one. Lots of people to introduce you to. We got 3 presenters in this session, and also our volunteer Yana Lee. So Yana, nice to have you with us today. Thanks so much for joining us. Wonderful session to introduce you to this afternoon. This is a team that I've had the pleasure of working with as elementary EcoSchools teachers in recent years, and they do such incredible work. So I'd like to introduce you to the 3 of them to begin. Diana Will-Stork is an advocate for inquiry and inclusive emergent curriculum. She's been doing this work for 23 years in lots of different roles in elementary schools, including being a classroom teacher, special education, ESL, reading recovery, and as a teacher librarian, which is what she was when I first met her. She has done such incredible work in environmental education in her own school, and we're very happy to have her as an instructor in our additional qualification courses in environmental education at OISE. And she does that alongside Sybille Parry, who is one of her co-leaders today. Sybille has been an educator for 30 years in a variety of roles, just like Diana has. Classroom teacher from K to 6, teacher librarian, special ed leader, and a digital lead learner. And through all these roles, she calls herself a committed curriculum geek. And she has co-taught the Environmental Education Part 2 course with Diana, and will do so again this summer. Thank you, both of you, for that. And finally, Samantha Berman, I'd like to introduce you to our 3rd presenter. She's 20 years of teaching experience in the elementary grades. She has a passion for environmental education. She's been part of the EcoSchools program at Huron Street Public School for the past 10 years. And in that time, she's helped move it from bronze to platinum alongside Diana. And she's currently teaching grade 3 and loves collaborating with her eco-minded colleagues. So with that, we're going to begin with an land acknowledgement, and then we'll get right underway.
Thank you. So we welcome you to this presentation. It's kind of titled Tips and Tricks, but really it's a smorgasbord of ideas. We're going to do the land acknowledgement slightly different, and Miss Parry is going to Sybille back it up. So at Huron, we deeply have believed in doing personal land acknowledgements, and this is a way of furthering our connection to the land. We have an inquiry going on with the Urban Indigenous Education Centre as part of Toronto District School Board, which all our schools are from. And Dr. Duke Radberg spoke about how can you do a land acknowledgement without seeing pictures of the land or being on the land or being in relationship, in connection to the land. And so at Huron, we've really tried to develop the stories of the land and to let our students take charge of the land acknowledgements. So starting with their identity, their connection to place, what they're thankful for, and then a little bit of Huron's history. So you'll see that even the trees in our schools have stories on them, and that's how we build that relationship and connection. So if we go to the next slide, this is how we're going to invite you to do a land acknowledgement, a personal one yourself. Ideally, if you can stand up and be rooted on the land, that would be fantastic. I'm going to try that as I move on my screen. This is an example in our virtual teaching. So even in kindergarten, and this comes from kindergarten, we ask the students to lead the land acknowledgement. So on this land we live on, what are you thankful for? And we'll ask them to say their name, something they're thankful for, and a reason. And then we center it in the names of the Indigenous peoples who at Huron we recognize their enduring presence. So that's the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat. So I'm going to let you just lead that either reflectively in your head or out loud in your space. And it's a natural point, just drift back to us. Thank you for taking a bit of a risk on that. And we have examples of personalized land acknowledgements. If you're interested, our contact information's at the end of this presentation. And examples range all the way from grade 3 up to grade 6. And with the older kids, we delve more into the problematic history. So for example, Huron, we're located on Anishinaabe land, and many of our signs in our annex neighborhood at Bloor and Spadina in Toronto reflect that. But Huron itself is a derogatory term that was imposed upon the Wendat. So the relationship of language, land, and space is an interesting one that we try to put into our land acknowledgements. So thank you.
All right. So we are a small group, and can I just say kudos to you for showing up here on a Saturday afternoon at 2:30. Oh my goodness, I'm so impressed that we even have participants in this seminar. So thank you for coming. We would really like to take just a short moment and ask you to reflect on these questions, and ideally just respond in the chat. Because we're a small group, I would say this. If you would be willing to do the last question out loud, we'd love to hear from you. And I know it's very reductionist to say, explain yourself in one word, but you can be playful, you can be serious. Just choose, if you can, one word that kind of encapsulates, I'm going to say, who you are today. So if you would reply to the rest in chat, the other questions, and say your word. If you don't want to do that, you can just put that in the chat as well. And we'll just give you about a minute or less to just do that. Okay, aw, David. I just had to say aw. And hello. I'm gonna borrow from what Hillary said. I'm gonna say, she said curriculum geek, which I am, but I'm also an eco geek. Nice. Wonderful. Thank you for that. And feel free to keep going. I want to be respectful of all of our time. We are a small group, so as we move on, if you would like to, if you want to interrupt us, if you have questions, if you want to go in a different direction, we have the ability to do that. And so so feel free to break past that normal Canadian quiet introversion tendency, and anyway, feel free to ask or interrupt as you are so moved. All right. So moving on. All right. So I'm Sybille Parry. I've been teaching for a really long time at the TDSB. I've reached a point where I don't want to say how many years I've been teaching anymore. In the second half of my career at the TDSB, I've become really involved and excited by just eco-learning, eco-justice, the opportunities we have to learn from the kids and the place that we're in. So I'm very happy to be here today, co-presenting with two good friends. And thank you for coming again. So my part of the presentation is going to focus on tips and tricks for running an Eco Kids Club, but really the subtext is the title, which is starting with student voice and building to student advocacy. Because really, we feel like that's where the rubber meets the road. And so, so hopefully some of that will be useful to you. So my first tip, and some of this is you know this, But my first tip is to invite and to create a space where students want to come. And I had a beautiful picture on this slide, but my good friend Diana pointed out all these little faces were on it, and they were doing something funny with their hands, and we were singing some song at an Eco Kids Club, and the kids were packed into the room I was in, and it was a moment of joy. And so that's what we're hoping to do. We're hoping to create a place where they want to come, where we can use our gifts of hospitality and just make them want to walk in the door, because without that, it's hard to know where to go next. All right. Tip number 2 is connect to place. And I did have the privilege of teaching in probably the most beautiful school in the Toronto District School Board for 6 years. This year, I've moved on to virtual school. But our place was magnificent. But I've taught in many different places. I've taught in a suburban environment with kind of a monoculture approach to the schoolyard. Schoolyards where asphalt is the dominant theme. And what I would suggest is that place starts in the heart, as was expressed in that quote by David Orr, that place is what the students and we bring with us. We create that sense of place, starting with where we are, but it's also what we have within. And so at the Island School, every year, our principal initiated something called Love My Playground and invited students to go around and put big hearts on all the places that they loved in the schoolyard. And he did it year after year. And every year the basketball hoops were a favorite place of our students. And it was just a way to start the year off and to honor this beautiful space that we had the privilege of working in. So another tip is being inclusive. And one of the ways that we did this in our Eco Kids Club is we had bring a friend meetings. Probably every month or so. It would be, you can bring a friend today, and we wouldn't do the work. We would just go off and do something fun. So in this case, we made bird feeders, and we went out and hung them up in the early winter. And what touches my heart about these slides is one of the little girls who came is completely nonverbal, global developmental delay. And she felt like she was part of the team, and she continued to come consistently. So welcome everybody, because you don't know what gifts are going to walk through your door. So the next tip is to balance work and play. And when you're running an Eco Kid team, there's always this sense of urgency, and we have all these things to do. There's a list of, it's the portfolio has so many points that we need to check off, and it's true. But we found that when we balanced work with play, hearkening back to my last point, it just kept the engagement going and kept the energy going throughout the year. We might go on a winter scavenger hunt. We might look for animal tracks. We regularly played eco games. Sometimes we went to the beach. And it was just really important to balance all that beautiful, fun activity with the stuff that needed to be done, like waste audits and monitoring lights and garbage. And so, that worked well for us. Another thing we discovered, and again, many of you know this, but maybe haven't thought of it as applying to Eco Kids. We followed student interest. So we had a lot of interest in birds. The Toronto Island is a stopover for birds on their long migration south and north. So you get an incredible array of birds. And the kids we had some teachers that were birders, and so we're pretty knowledgeable. We had the great good fortune of being a partner school with the Natural Science School. And so we could borrow things like a set of binoculars, and we could really get out there and see the birds. So building on that natural interest just created all kinds of energy within our group and kept us going. We had a teacher who was really involved with FLAP, Fatal Light Awareness Program, that works to protect birds from flying into the windows downtown in downtown towers. But even on the island, we had all that nature was reflected in these big plate glass windows, and we had this issue as well. So we developed bird windows for the whole school, and really mined that interest and got kids interested in joining our club. Kids would go on bird walks. One class found 27 birds on their weekly walk. I'm not a birder, but that's pretty exciting. So we just tapped into that. My next tip would be to seize opportunity. And we had the opportunity to connect with the Roberta Bondar Foundation. She runs the Roberta Bondar, or the organization runs the Bondar Challenge for schools, which invites schools to go out and just to take photographs, but like kindergartens taking photographs and grade 6s, and we invited our parents in and they took photographs. And Roberta Bondar is a pretty amazing model, certainly to people of my generation, but we easily communicated that across the years, and generated a lot of interest and excitement. And as it turns out, Roberta Bondar is a huge birder and a bird enthusiast, and so those two streams flowed into a river of interest. So that was really lovely. And I would suggest, when later we talk about treasures and troubles or assets and deficits in our own schoolyard, that you could use something like this, the Roberta Bondar Challenge, and you could have students take pictures of the beautiful things and the things that need work. So I would encourage you to check out the Bondar Challenge. It's really a rich opportunity. Tip number 7 connects directly to the second half of our presentation, student voice. We began every year with a big, I guess, a mandala. I suppose you can see it there, although it's all covered with Post-it notes. And I kind of phrased it like the may-dos and the must-dos. And the must-dos were the turn off the lights campaigns and the reduce the garbage, the things we have to do as part of the EcoSchools program. And then the may-dos were, the kids had many, many ideas for all kinds of things that we could do. And we kept that vision. We created this vision every year, this kind of eco vision, and we kept it posted so we could go back and refer to it and see what we had done and see what we still needed to do. And similarly, at the end of the year, we used a Padlet, and we created an end of the year reflection, stop, start, continue, and students had the opportunity to express their voice in this way. What went well, and what do we want to improve next year? And even the little kids that maybe couldn't quite navigate the Padlet were paired with slightly older kids, and we had that partnership going. So that was an important part. This, I felt, went really well. Tip number 8, building cross-team connections. And as I've mentioned, our good neighbors were the Natural Science School. And every year that we ran Eco Club, one of those teachers would come to our meetings, connect with the kids, and just be a resource for us. So that was an incredible resource. But we also, within the team, the first year, the grade 1s and 2s, and eventually the kindergarten started to come, and they were the eco kids. They came and they participated and they brought joy. And then when they returned, they had a new role that they could adopt, and that would be eco ambassador. If they returned again, senior eco ambassador, with increasing levels of participation and leadership within the group. And of course, the caretaker and the principal and multiple teachers. So that cross-team independence really, or interdependence, really worked well. And this initiative came from those kids. They remembered from years ago, before I came to the school, they used to have this golden garbage can, and it would go to the class that had reduced their waste the most. There was a contest for 4 weeks in May. So we found the golden garbage can up on a high and dusty shelf, and we resurrected it. And the class that would win a golden garbage can filled with candy. And then, being eco ambassadors, they challenged me on the kind of candy that I chose. I chose lollipops. That was not okay. And we had to go to bulk candy. And then the year I left, it even came into discussion that there wasn't going to be candy. It was going to be extra recess. So these are all rich conversations that I was very pleased to be part of. Eventually, in time, this student voice developed into student advocacy. And in the interest of time, this was a letter to our counselor about the fact that condos downtown don't have a green bin program automatically unless the landlord chooses to have one. So we advocated about that. We participated in student vote, and students learned about the different parties, learned about their platforms, and I'm pleased to say that when our school voted, it was a very green vote. So that was super satisfying. And one of our students said, it was the year that Mike Schreiner first won a provincial seat in Parliament, and a 7-year-old student, admittedly a really bright student, she said, well, we should write him a letter, and we should tell him to just wait for us, because when we're old enough, we will vote, and we'll vote him in as the premier. And we did. We wrote that letter, and their little voices, and it was just, that's why we do the things we do. The Take Back the Tap initiative started with the local cafe, the Island Cafe. Please visit it. If you go to the Island, they're wonderful. They completely eliminated single-use plastic bottles, and they started this Take Back the Tap campaign. We jumped on it. Our students learned a song. I was going to teach it to you, but we don't have enough time. Email me and we'll set it up. They did a freeze dance, a flash dance mob at the ferry docks, and we got the word out that we wanted to be a blue school. And I just put this in, just the last thing about student voice. The kindergarten team, we had some trees brought in, and students took ownership because they needed to be watered, and the kindergarten team named their tree Sparkle Toots, as only a kindergarten class can. And in terms of voice, I would encourage you to take 10 seconds and read this slide, because it kind of captures what we were hoping for. We'll be sharing this presentation with you. I should have said that early on, so you'll have a chance to get all this. And of course, community connections, finding out what's going on. On the island, the Great Canadian Shoreline Cleanup was big. Take Me Outside Day, Rethink Your Drink. Whatever is going on that you think will capture your community, that brings a lot of energy to the thing too. And yes, I know I keep going back to our island environment. I can't help myself. We had an Eco Kid celebration at the end of the year. So tip 10 is celebrate. And we were able to have a fire with s'mores and bannock. And that was purely due to our natural science school connection. So that was incredible. Diana and I did it another year, and we had watermelons and strawberry, and the kids were pretty excited about that too. So it doesn't have to be s'mores. So those are just some ideas to kind of get you thinking, get you going. And really, one of the things that a lot of us are thinking about, and the keynote speaker this morning alluded to this, or more than alluded to it, talked about it a fair bit, is to think about not just the perfect spaces, the parks and the islands that are already these kind of natural paradises, but what is in your schoolyard or your space that you can build on. And so what we would like you to do, if you'd be willing, we'd like to take just a couple minutes to ask you to either use this QR code, or I will put the link in the chat. And we'd like you to come to this website And just think about what the treasures and the troubles are in your schoolyard, just to kind of frame some of your thinking. And the way you do this on this Padlet is you just, if you haven't done Padlet before, you just click on the little blue, pink plus sign, and you can add your ideas on there. And if you are able to, once you've posted your idea, maybe you would take a moment and respond to somebody else's idea. Thank you, Dee. Thank you. And we'll just spend maybe, I don't know, 2 or 3 minutes on this before we move on. Oh, I don't know how to turn these notifications off. Okay, sorry. Sorry about that. I'll just mute myself, then you don't have to hear them. Yes, I'm seeing small spaces, busy streets, interesting weeds. Love that.
Also a reference to COVID times and maybe how that's changed treasures or troubles.
All right. So do feel free to continue to add to that or to respond to others. But we will move on. And actually, we can do these things at the same time. If you wanted to just take a moment, review these tips. If you have any questions, we can do a quick pause for questions right now. And if you think of questions as you go, you can just put them into the chat and we'll address them by the end. But at this point, I hand the presentation baton over to Diana and Samantha, and they'll take it from here.
For some reason, our tip number 5 has disappeared, Sybille. It's like the missing tip. Oh, there it is.
You know what it is? It's because I accidentally animated it. Sorry.
That just makes it a big reveal. It's a surprise. So the ones that are highlighted, follow student interest, seize opportunity, and student voice, are ones that Samantha and I are going to delve a little deeper into and how we do that at Huron. But it's funny because Sybille's presentation, we didn't get a chance to see. And when we looked at it, Samantha and I were like, geez, we do a lot of these things too. So it felt a little pat on the back, but also made us reflect maybe on how much we do that we're not aware of.
Thanks. So Diana and I work at Huron Street Public School, which is a K-6 school located on a small parcel of land in the Annex neighborhood in Toronto. And it happens to be a 5-minute walk north from Oise UT. And unlike Sybille's experience at the wonderful island school setting, Our school ground is very small, and yet it is still possible to have rich learning take place. Our front yard, which you can see in the two photos on the left and the right, are where our FDK nature program takes place, which is taught by Diana, and she'll speak to us about that shortly. So you want to go to the next slide. So what are we going to briefly share in the next 15 minutes or so is how we've led inquiry in our small urban schoolyard with a K-3 focus. And we're also going to share concrete examples to show how we've integrated EcoSchool criteria and data management from some classrooms from grades 1 to 6. And then if you're interested, during question time, you're invited to ask us about a schoolyard revitalization plan that we've been working through, which we are in year 4 of. So our team structure is similar to Sybille's. We have many parties that make up our eco team, from classroom reps to junior student eco team leaders and a core group of teaching staff. We also have a very dedicated group of eco parents, which we're very grateful for. And they've taken on different initiatives over the years, depending on their own interests, from providing vegetable seeds for all the classes to plant, to running fundraiser campaigns by selling reusable products and plants and vegetables to the community. And when we head outside, one key learning goal that we set is by asking the question, how can we use our natural learning environment on our urban school ground as an opportunity for inquiry-based learning? So like all schools, and as Sybille has just led us through, we have treasures and troubles. And one trouble or challenge that you can see here is that we have a bit of a drainage problem in the back of our school, behind our school, and we have a bit of a Lake Huron happening. So when we take our students outside and we work with our students, we take what might seem like a problem here or a challenge, and we use it to inquire about it and to make some investigations. So it's often a starting point.
And so I guess our biggest message is to use what you have as the basis of rich inquiry. And so we started with kindergarten to grade 3 because that's where we had willing staff. And this was a project 5 years in the making. And I think the pandemic has pushed us faster in some ways, because now we have a lot of people who see the richness of learning outside. And so I'm not going to speak to the quotes on the screen, but just that the environment provides a lot of the rich inquiry that can happen in all seasons. And at Huron, we're out in all seasons, all weather, and that's been communicated to our families from the get-go. So to help us a little, we're looking at the continuum of inquiry, and we've disrupted it because we've actually put it in a different direction. Normally it's horizontally, we're putting it up and down, and we're putting getting to know inquiry at the top, where normally you would see that as lower stage. So on our little screens, if you can camera on, if you feel comfortable, or if not, you're welcome to type in the chat, just where would you put yourself on your comfort level with inquiry, on the continuum of inquiry. So on the screen, you can do this in a standing way, and I'm going to stand tall and I'm at the top. I'm just getting to know inquiry, or maybe shrinking down. So this is the fun of this, and you can do this outside with a physical line. I'm in the implementing inquiry stage, or really down at the bottom, I'm feeling confident. Also looking at the chat. And I'm going to ask fellow presenters if there's something that they notice with where people are standing, because I'm looking at the screen. It seemed like a range. Am I right in that? Like some people getting to know?
Most people are implementing, feeling confident. Yeah.
Okay, interesting. And I think that's the great thing about the approach we've taken at Huron, is that we're taking people from whatever comfort level they are, and we're building a collaborative community together that's focused on inquiry. So we've made inquiry the guiding impetus for our EcoSchool program, but also for all curricular engagement. So Sybille, going fast through the next couple of slides. If you're not familiar with inquiry, TDSB, this is the inquiry cyclical wheel that we use, and you may have seen it on our virtual library, but just all the different skills from questioning, that's part of exploring, through to investigating, processing, and creating, and you will get access to this. What we like is the circular approach, that it keeps on going and going, and you can access it from any point. Knowing that it's a continuum, we approach it from the point that we can do guided inquiry all the way to open-ended, and it depends on the topic, the students that you get, the teacher in terms of comfort levels. So we recognize that there's different entry points to it. And also we're building a community. So our kids who are part of inquiry 4 times out of 5 in their cycle in kindergarten are building the capacity as they go up in grades through to grade 6. Our focus is on uncovering the curriculum. So we've looked at curriculum in a kind of a little bit of a different way as a school. And I know this is the focus in universities, and what we've been taught is great, that we're focusing on essential questions and not so much checking off boxes in the curriculum. And then we look at the hardest part of inquiry is, how do I start it? Where does it begin? And so looking at provocations as being as simple as a shared experience, a walk, and asking questions on a walk, noticing something from a photo, for example, this photo with the reusable coffee mug on top of the car and all the questions, treasures, troubles that may raise. And it could be a book that is the spark. And so we're finding multiple places to engage, and then we're meeting with colleagues to discuss how do we enter in. This particular capacity building series document, I think Samantha is going to put in the chat. It's just the guiding of what is inquiry if you're new in it.
So at Huron, we've used 3 different approaches to guided inquiry, and the first approach Diana has spoken to already is by asking or creating a big question as a lead-in. So we pose the question to students, and we all go outside to search in the environment, and we use that as the basis for our inquiry. For instance, a big question that we've used is, what treasures and troubles can we find in our school ground for the animals that live there? Or how can we tell if the trees in our school ground are healthy or not? And then we use these big questions that can be used as a springboard to other questions that students may want to zero in on and investigate further.
In pandemic times, we've divided up our schoolyard and given regular, scheduled, socially distanced revisits points. So with FDK inquiry, we're in our 3rd year of that. They have the front of the school, and they visit it constantly, 4 times for an hour every single day. And it's apart from outdoor play. But even in grade 5, 6, our oldest learners, they have spots that they revisit. So kids will have special trees or a connection to an outdoor space and seeing it many times. And that leads to approach number 2, which is to give the kids just an opportunity to build, create, explore, connect with a space, and then document their discoveries and their questions to see where you might inquire. This is a little more open, but also moving from guided to open. So for example, this is a kindergarten student who's noticing a leaf that won't fall off his special tree. And that led to the question, or the maybes, that it fell and is stuck on a branch, or maybe it's waiting for winter, which then led into a rich inquiry. And so when kids are a little stuck, moving forward, Sybille, we feed through with books. We give them lots of experience with text and opportunities to delve in and play with things. So to be the leaf stuck on the tree, to embody it, to learn about snowplows, learn about snow. Oftentimes in winter, you're like, how can we do inquiry in the space? It's cold. We set up the conditions that kids know they're going to be in that space, they're prepared, and then we feed the inquiry forward. And then we notice, what is it that they're specifically getting involved or interested in? And so a lot of documentation was created around footprints and tracks that they noticed in our schoolyard. And that led to a small inquiry group that was looking at prints and how can they make prints, but also what animal prints they could find. And as always with inquiry, it's going with the student interest. So another group was more interested in shapes and patterns, and so started to explore that and making shapes and patterns. And you'll see the carryover from the outdoor space to the indoor space. That's when you know it's a really rich inquiry starting to develop. Another group focused on animal homes and buildings and structures. And then another group was more focused in the next slide on engineering and design. And so it's having multiple things, but all connected around ideas of literacy and math around shape, pattern, and they're all weaving together in a class. And this could happen in a class basis, or like I have the joy of 3 kindergarten classes, it's happening across classes. Oftentimes, besides time, the big question or the big stumbling block is kids not developing rich questions. My kids don't know how to ask questions. My kids are struggling with questions. Not sure if that's something that you've experienced or had, but we find that both approaches, approach 1 and approach 2, they start to pose questions, and it's a matter of listening and documenting and teasing it out. And so simple experiences, as you can see on the screen, I'm not going to read them, lead to questions.
Okay, I'm just going to post that article as well into the chat. And so our third approach to inquiry is collecting data from the school community or your school ground and posing and asking questions about it. And which can also be used to develop campaigns to raise awareness of a certain issue, which we've done at our school. So we figured at this point, we don't have time to go through all of these different examples. Hopefully we have time to go through one. We thought if you could maybe turn your cameras on for a moment or put in the chat, which example are you most interested in hearing? And we'll go from there. So there's a grade 1 example, eco-inquiry, grade 3 data analysis looking at transportation to school. Number 3 is grade 3-4 doing data of the waste audit, or grade 5-6 some global issues data.
And you'll have access to all of these through the slide deck. I saw a vote for 1 and I see a vote for all, 1 or 2. It's interesting because it depends who's in the space as to which ones they kind of gravitate towards.
Why don't you do 1, Diana?
Okay. So grade 1, we'll flip quick to that, Sybille. So next slide is grade 1. So with grade 1 kids, we raised the question, so this is coming from a shared question, of where do you see eco activity in our school? Where do you see evidence of eco reps, our classroom eco reps, and our eco team in action? And so they went around with camera and they just took in pairs pictures of what they saw. And then we looked at the big screen with some of those pictures, and together as a class talked about them. What does that make us think of? What does that make us wonder? And then back in the pairs with their iPad, they created a poplet of what they saw, what they observed, and what they wondered. And we gave them the sentence stems, I see, I wonder, I think, and then they created kind of a bit of a map. And going to the next slide, this led into the development of some questions that they looked at. And some of these questions are hard to investigate for 6-7-year-olds. So for example, one was, how much electricity do we save in our monthly Earth hours? So instead of doing just Earth hours in March, one of the activities they noticed was a sign saying our monthly Earth hour. And they wanted to know how much we saved. And so then they come up with questions and notes coming from that. Whoop, we just lost the presentation. And so, Sybille, if you can advance it just for the sake of time, I know I'm flying through this example. They had the opportunity to interview someone who might know the information, because we want to show people as resources of knowledge. And so they chose either the caretaker, the principal, maybe a parent, and they asked questions. Were you asked to do this? What does the school do? What do you observe? And we got data. So even TDSB, which has data on how much electricity is saved in Earth hour, they broke it down using base 10 blocks to represent more or less, like which is more, which is less, and try to figure it out from a school level compared to what a regular day would look like, a day with Earth hour, what would that look like? And so that kind of investigation is using data as the springboard for inquiry, which then leads to further questions. And that's the same with all the examples that Sybille's going to quickly fly through. Just on the screen, Sybille may be giving it a bit for each moment. Analyzing school transportation data, surveying the whole school, and then kids analyzing the results to see sustainable versus unsustainable. Next one. You have to do a waste audit. So we give it to a class because we want it to be a learning opportunity. So analyzing the waste audit to look at how much is in each part, but also to do a concrete waste graph. Sybille, next one. So we lay out our waste on our schoolyard and invite our kids to comment and to notice the compost in the garbage, the recycling in the garbage. What does this tell us? And that's a data source. Grade 5-6 investigations, starting with a data source, whether it's a world population map, whether it's banning books data table, something that sparks the questions and inquiry, and then leads to the investigation on the next pages. Describing the issue, role of government, so directly links into social studies curriculum at that grade level, but also goes beyond the curriculum, we hope. And the point of this was also to develop an action that would be a local action. So we're going to leave it open to discussion and questions. Each one of us is going to type our email into the chat, but we're very curious if you have suggestions, comments, or how you yourself, some eco tips or tricks, or something that we said that resonated.
Just if I may, Hillary has to end this session. Toot sweet. So I'm just gonna, we'll put our emails in and I'll put the presentation link in into the chat as well.
Okay.
And I'm so sorry, we have to keep exactly on time for this conference, mainly because the Zoom hosts, we flip between from one session to another. So my apologies about that. Because you folks have such rich stories to share. Like we had hoped to actually spend a full day at Huron. That was our original intention as part of the field studies component of this conference, had we been in person. And I can see why. There is so much to learn from you three. And what a fabulous presentation. Oh my goodness. Thank you so much. And I'm seeing lots of other thank yous starting to pop into the chat as well. And if you're able, Sybille, to pop in the link to the resources, that would be fantastic. I know people would probably really appreciate
So that's the link that anybody with the link can view. So yeah, that's what that is. Thank you, Hillary, for your kind words and hosting and to.
Well, and thank you for modeling as part of the TDSB's EcoSchools program, what it means to be a platinum level school with not only just rich learning, but also rich inquiry-based learning, which is such an important part of the conversation around how we get active and engaged citizens in this work, is we need them to be active and engaged in their learning right from an early age. And the three of you model that in your practice so beautifully. So thank you for all of the work you do as part of the EcoSchools program. And thank you so much for sharing your work with us today.
Thank you. Thanks everyone for coming.